This is a very interesting panel, moderated by Zain Veli. He's from the VP Strategy in Northweather, Canada. He's a campaign strategist, and I'm very happy to introduce all the others. Irakli I'm gonna blow this one off, but whatever. Irakli Porchkhidze, right?
Perfect.
Vice President at Georgian Institute for Strategic Studies, GISS, Georgia. Welcome. Panagiotis. Papachatzis. Panagiotis Papachatzis, Red World Digital Group Strategy and Communications Advisor, Greece. Applause for me, please. Thank you. Now I'm going to try this one. Levan Zhorzholiani. Okay, I was good at this one, so this is 3 out of 3. Head of Strategic Communication at the National Center for Teacher Professional Development, Georgia, also. Now this is one that's going to be a tough. Akilnathan Logeswaran, right? Something. Akilnathan Logeswaran. Okay, perfect. Akilnathan Logeswaran. Digital Ambassador Deutsche Gesellschaft für Internationale Zusammenarbeit, right? Something like that. GISS, right? So he's from Germany. Now, all humor now stops. We're into a very interesting subject, and afterwards we will have our moderator Zain Veli to tell us something more about the noise in our political, or that is digital discourse. Enjoy.
Perfect. How's everyone's afternoon? Come on, give me some round of applause. How's everyone's afternoon? That's good. That's the caffeine clapping. I like that. By the way, can we just, are we going to share mics? I think we might have to share. Sure. Okay, perfect. So I wanted to introduce this panel, but I wanted to do a few housekeeping notes. And I know my back is faced to half of you right now. So maybe I'll just stand up and just give these housekeeping notes very quickly as well. A couple of things. This panel, we're going to spend about 30 minutes talking about the state of digital influence in politics. What it means, where it's at, and what the competing forces are. We learned a lot this morning about influence in many sectors. Well, we get to touch on politics right now. The second thing I want to say is that I have a Kickstart question that I want to throw to all of you. So if you go onto the Slido app right now and enter the code DCN2, number 2, there's a question there for you. And the question ultimately is, are actors who want to weaponize digital influence currently winning in politics? Simple agree or disagree question. And it would be we'd be really grateful if you could answer it, because it might help direction some of the conversation that we have on stage today. And then I want to add one final thing before we get started and before I introduce our panelists, which is you see 5 men on stage. And I know for many of us it's sensitive to have panels or manels in certain cases. So I do want to make mention that this was unconscious in that sense to have 5 men on stage. The majority of the speakers at this conference have been women. But we do want to make sure that all voices are certainly heard and that this was very much not deliberate or an act of deliberation in that conversation. And we're going to try to include as many voices as we can around the table. Cool. Okay. Thank you for that introduction. You do not need to clap. Okay. If you clap, only standing ovation. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Let's get started. What I'm going to do is I'll get each of the speakers to introduce themselves, tell us in 30 seconds who they are, where they're from, country, and just a very quick synopsis of their current work. And then what we'll do is go around and talk about a few pillar conversations that I think are going to be very important to the current state of digital influence in politics. So if I can throw it to you, Akil, right here.
Okay. My name is Akil. That's the easiest short version. I currently work in Ghana, West Africa. I am from Germany. And I work for the German Development Corporation there, working on digital governance. So I'm responsible for all of our digital approaches in governance to decentralize the country and to make good practices. And I'm going to move on soon to move to London and work for the Facebook office and be responsible for groups. And I'm here to talk about actually the Vote Swiper app that I previously introduced.
Perfect. And we'll get into that in terms of gamification and politics. But thanks for that introduction. Irakli, yourself.
I'm Irakli Porchkhidze from the Georgian Institute of Strategic Studies. I'm one of the founders. I'll be talking more about, and my background is actually in security policy and foreign policy. So I'll be looking at the weaponization of information from a security perspective and why that is a problem. You've been talking a lot here about the influencers and individuals, but I think we're missing a part about the state-sponsored information warfare, which I think is a big part of where we are right now. So my focus is going to be on that.
My name is Levan from Georgia. I have journalistic background. I used to be a TV host, a producer, a reporter covering conflicts and politics. Then I moved to public sector, had been in charge as a speechwriter and head of communications at the Ministry of Sport and Culture. Beside of this, I was media coordinator, one of the biggest events such as Black Sea Jazz Festival, Biennale in Venice, and Frankfurt Book Fair.
Awesome, thank you.
Hello, my name is Panagiotis. You can call me Panos, it's more easy. I'm from Greece. I'm a digital communication consultant, both in branch and in political communication. I worked for two prime ministers in Greece, George Papandreou, George Papadimos. And because I am from Greece, I know how everything can screw up. So I'm here to talk about it. How we screwed up about populism in Greece and how we can fix it.
So, now, Panos, hold the mic, because I want to go to you. So, thanks for those introductions, guys. What my job is on this panel is I'm going to try to take some of the lessons that these gentlemen have learned throughout their times and see if we can port them beyond the realm of politics and signal why they've been so important. So, I want to start with you, because you just talked about Greece. You talked about a lot of wreckage. Talk to us about that. What is your work? When we were chatting offsite, you were talking about education, you were talking about populism. What's been the nature of your work?
Okay. First of all, let's talk about the rise of populism in Greece. During the last 10 years, nothing was normal in Greece. And a lot of populists used the anti-austerity wave, to raise populism in Greece with three main ways. First of all, fake news. Second of all, fake digital influencers. And third of all, real influencers that were populist. As a result of that, a lot of populists went to the parliament and became very powerful. Even the Nazis became powerful inside the parliament. And they proceed to a lot of yelling, a lot of ad hominem attacks, a lot of character assassinations. As a result, all the modest conversation went back. And all the political, and I don't see it only for politicians, modest cedar from modest right to social democrat, lose the impact during those 10 years.
Why? Why?
Because none of them used the social media and the digital transformation in their benefit, and we didn't succeed to just tone down the populism with more clever ways.
Right.
And I'm the first one that I'm saying that I failed, but we failed collectively. When you screw up something, the first thing that you are doing is to try to fix it, okay? So one of the ideas we have to fix that is through education.
Yeah.
So we created Win the Race. It's an educational experiment, not an organization.
And sir, the name one more time for people?
Win the Race.
Win the Race, okay.
Yeah. Right. It's an educational experiment for politicians. The idea behind that is very simple. We're trying to educate especially young politicians, modest one, okay, conservative and progressive. Not even to how to run successfully an election campaign in the digital era, but how to build communities around them through real political issues.
Right.
Okay, we already trained about 40 young politicians for Greek parliament, European parliament, and some local elections. And the results that we have are very encouraging to proceed.
Do you mind me asking, tactically, what are you training them? Are you giving them digital social strategy training? What exactly?
From A to Z, for example,
Yeah.
Non-digital, the basics. How to set up their office.
Okay.
How to perform an election strategy, okay, in the field. How to learn how to read polls and focus groups
Right.
as tools. And then how to set up a real digital communication strategy.
Right.
How to build a solid reputation management strategy, because none of them have. So they are very vulnerable to populist attacks, okay? How to perform how to form a crisis plan, and even more, not only how to run for the elections, but between elections, because in Greece we don't have the culture of campaigning between the elections.
Right.
Okay, to start building a culture of campaigning through real political issues, and how to find digital influencers that will collectively stand behind you in those issues and for the issues, not for you at the beginning, and how to be successful in that. It's a very difficult project.
Yeah.
Our goal is to build tools around all these things. For example, in Greece, we only have tools to find the digital influencers about brands.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have tools to find digital influencers about political issues.
Sure.
That's one of our goals. I want to.
No, I'm just, we'll pause it right there, because I want to.
Very similar things.
Yeah, because I want to put Akil in the spot right here. So we're talking about, in Greece, the rise of trying to educate politicians to effectively run better campaigns. Know what the 101, the necessities, the tools are. You've taken the other approach, which is not about the politicians, but about the mass public. And so I want to actually throw it to you. Explain to us what your tool does. I know you gave a bit of a pitch earlier, but I'm also reading a question on screen which says, the first one, which is, how do we fight populism with digital tools? Didn't they effectively help create the situation? So give us a quick pitch of what you're doing, and then on that question, I think you'd be appropriate to maybe give us your thoughts.
Sure. I actually wanted to exactly tackle this question. If digital tools are only evil, or it can actually help, and I think the last European elections have seen that they can help, and I want to pitch kind of our case, how we managed to do that, and kind of also we can actually see results. First of all, the app that I previously mentioned, it's called Vote Swiper, and basically what it does is just creates informed decision making. So what we see the rise of populism in many countries around the world, and what I truly believe is that you can beat populism also with when you tier them on the battleground of competing on topics. They always they rise on emotions, but when they actually have to go to the ground where they have to compete with topics, then they lose quite fast, and you see that really fast. And what it does, for example, in this app, we have 30 questions that you answer. So the party has to answer all these questions on topics. So they have to say yes or no. They're in favor of it or against it. And in the end, every user that uses the app or the platform online will have a proper result. And then they realize, oh, I only have 30% agreement with that party, and the party is able to give statements why they say yes or no. But then you quickly realize that some of the populist parties don't really have answers to the questions. Which brings me to the result of the European elections. We ran this for 4 elections before. Now in the European elections, especially in Germany, we had a huge turnout. We had, I think, it was the first time in 25 years that so many people went to vote, actually. And my thesis is that actually the more easy it is for people to get informed about elections, the more they will actually vote. And what we've seen is this tool in Germany, it compared 42 parties. And for the European Parliament, 9 parties made it into the European Parliament. And out of these 9 parties, 4 or 5 of them, no one knew before. There's a party, Volt Europe, that hasn't been existent before, and they still got a seat in the European Parliament. Why is that? Because they were very often very highly ranked in our app. So
Yeah.
people got informed and read about their policies.
I want to actually, there's a statement you made that I want to pick up on, which I want to throw to Irakli, which was the whole concept of the more information people get, the better decisions they will make. You've been studying the whole concept of state-sponsored fake information, fake news from a security vantage point. Is that always the case? Are we always in a situation where more information is always better, especially when we have state-sponsored actors whose, not sole purpose, but one of the purposes and one of the injections they have into the system is fake news, fake information?
Well, just kind of, I come from a think tank background, so I'm not really a tech person or an influencer myself. So I'll try to kind of conceptualize a bit, because I think it's extremely important to understand that we live in a completely different world. Because most of the time, national power has been defined in many ways, and it has been through military power, geography, population, etc. But nowadays, everyone understands the information is actually the element of national power. So from that standpoint, we have to start to understand that the wars which have been fought in kinetic ways, and just to explain, the kinetic warfare is something related to the military power, a hard power, has been really, really changing the entire scope of how the states and other actors view this. So I think in the years to come, we're going to be seeing a lot of that. And why? I'll be trying to explain that. As you said, when you throw a lot of information, what happens is that you change the decision-making patterns, which has not been the case before. And I think as time will pass, we'll be seeing that the smart data and the digital world is going to be the major battlefield for a lot of these things. And I'll try to explain why.
Yeah,
because
please.
the sovereignty is penetrable there. You don't have a sovereign territory, which has always been the case, because it's very difficult to influence someone before when you had a sovereign territory which was guarded and which basically had borders. Now you don't have borders. The other thing is that it's very cost efficient to wage these wars. You definitely don't have that much resources to be used for those purposes. And also, you have a lot of hybrid means. So you are not necessarily only focused on weaponizing information. You can weaponize debts, loans you grant to countries. You can weaponize energy resources and the way you supply it. So people call it a hybrid warfare in a way. But I think the biggest part of that will be focused on information.
Right.
Because it will have a long-lasting effects, and I can name few, which I think have been very, very consequential in a way. The US elections and the interference, everyone is talking about it. The racial tensions which have been brought up. I mean, I don't know if you know or not, but there's been a huge pile of research on that as well, actually, in the United States. But not only, the anti-vaccination campaigns which have been run.
Right.
I mean, this is a huge problem, because people don't see it through these lenses, but it actually helps to undermine other countries and create the tensions and the cracks and the divisions, which is a huge political problem.
Can I ask you a follow-up question, which is, you said something fascinating, which was, this has fundamentally altered the decision-making process for human beings. And we talk about this today, right? We talk about it as a net asset, which is anyone can publish content, and Levan, I want to get to you in a second about the media's role in this. But we've talked about it today as an asset in some of our other talks. You know, there's no barriers, there's no restrictions, anyone can get into the game, whether you're a media influencer working for an NGO, that there's a democratization of the platform. What have you seen now with mass saturation, especially in the political context? What have you seen as the alteration of how we make decisions now? I'm fascinated by that.
Well, my colleague and previous previous speaker has talked about the informed decisions and evidence-based decisions. Well, basically, you don't need that anymore, unfortunately. Because when you can influence people directly without the editor's responsibility for the credibility and the evidence-based journalism, what you create is a shortcut with the direct marketing of whatever your ideas are.
Sure.
And I think that's something that we have to be facing in the years to come, and that's a huge challenge.
And I want to pick up on that, because that's been an area that you, Levan, have also studied, which is where the media's role, has it eroded? Are they less important? Have they been completely foregone? Apologies to media colleagues in the room, but...
In digital era, media lost its basic function, because in any democratic society, the key function of the media is to perform a role of the watchdog and control the government. And for example, not trust the politician and supervise its action. And the media had this exclusivity during decades. And now in digital era, everyone can be a watchdog and supervise activities. And this is also the challenge and headache for communication specialists, especially those ones who are employed in governmental sectors and public sectors, because we had been receiving 100 of incoming calls about digital influencers who were cultural heritage protectors.
Yeah.
And they posted some damaged cultural ones and reacted and wanted our reaction very quickly as the ministry. So nowadays, everyone can be a watchdog, and so they are companionship with the media. And also the big problem also is that the information leakage, because it's high risk, and I had some issue when a public charity fund had some problems with paying, covering fees to private hospitals, and this charity fund was funding treatment of children with cancer. And one media organization was very quick to find this problem and started to investigate the case. And I was the media consultant and managed to negotiate with this media organization to not to cover and postpone the coverage, because the fund was planning to pay off all these loans, and the information publicized through the media could have had maybe negative circumstances, because hospitals could have refused to treat next patients. So after realizing that the public welfare was number one priority, editorial board agreed to postpone. But next day, someone posted all this issue on Facebook.
Right.
Yeah, so it was another headache for us, and it's the huge challenge in digital era.
Can I ask you a follow-up question, primarily out of interest, because I'm curious about this, because you have this specialty in influence and digital, but you were also a political staffer in your life. So could you speak to, if you're able to, how, when you dealt in politics, did you just try to bypass the media? Did you know that influencers were more important? Did you use the media as a validation of influence? I'd be kind of curious to get your thought process around being a political staffer, what that looked like.
For me, as a communication specialist, it's much easier to negotiate with media outlets who has reputation and takes care about this than digital influencers, because I'm not sure that our off-record talking would be another post, so this post. So it's really difficult for me. I don't have any experience about talking with digital influencers to involve in politics.
That's interesting. And I want to throw one thing on the table, which is to the entire group, whoever has an answer, which is a question posted here, which is saying, okay, so we've got the rise of apps, right? We've got this rise of populism. We've got media's watchdog role for whatever we may make it eroding. What can the platforms where this information is shared now, and this is an interesting thing because they still call themselves platforms, YouTube, Facebook, et cetera. They don't call themselves news outlets yet. And I know this is a big push in North America right now, which is trying to push them to say you are more than a platform. But let's use that term for now. What can these platforms do to start policing and maybe reintroducing the watchdog role? I saw you with an interest on that question.
Yeah, I think, so first of all, I can answer that question. I think there are many things that they can do. I think they already started also doing some things, but of course, for many of us, it's too slow. Facebook recently introduced that for the European elections, for example, that you cannot, which is actually also a problem, but you cannot donate to a specific campaign in another country, which was actually difficult because we had European elections.
Right.
But now you could, as a party family with across different countries, you could not pay for another party in another country, which is one of the things that you can do. But again, it's very sensitive. What I actually want to also go beyond this question is what can actually people do using these tools? Because of course the social media platforms can, or news outlets, depending on how you call it, can do things themselves, but it's also what can actually we as citizens do with these platforms? And that we've also seen, I come back again to the European elections because it's just so recent. In Germany, Germany is not that big on YouTube influencers, usually in politics. And we had a YouTuber who usually doesn't even talk about politics. And he had a video with 15 million views. Germany has 80 million citizens. And where he, for 1 hour, basically tore apart the two governing parties and explained why they're ruining the future of the young generation. And it had a massive influence on the elections that actually the Green Party, which is quite small in most of the European countries, became the second biggest party in the outcome. And it's an influencer there, but it's also people using tools like YouTube to have this, what you called, what media used to have, this checking of the government. Actually, now citizens can take over that role, depending on if you want it or not, but actually that's a lot of power that citizens can have and do use already.
Panos, I saw you chuckling. Was there something you wanted to add to that? Or?
Yeah. You know, digital media or networks or whatever tools are just tools, okay? We have a better depth of analysis nowadays. We can handle the information more accurate, etc., etc. But the fundamentals, for example, the content, it's only always going to be content. The message is always going to be message. The communities, nowadays you can build in different way communities, but the communities are going to be the same, are going to be around the cause, for example.
Sure.
So there's no easy solution in any of these, but we must try, especially the modest politicians and citizens, to try to fix our message.
Right.
Okay, not to be populist. We talk later that
Yeah.
you can fight populism with populism. I don't think you can fight populism with populism, but we be different.
Yeah.
With gamification, with different language, etc., etc. And maybe we can turn things around. It's going to be a difficult process, okay, a very difficult process, because populism is going to raise more in a few years, I think. Yeah.
Please, just jump.
Just fight with me.
And I want to go to these other two.
No, I
Yeah.
actually want to jump on that, and because it's also a question of how to combat populism and how digital tools can help with that. And I think this is something we need to understand fundamentally, why populism, and actually I will be even clearer on this because I have a very strong position on this, why also right-wing populism can use digital platforms easier. And I'll explain to you a little bit of fundamentals of politics and these tools. First of all, the right wing, if you call it like that, it's conservatism. To be conservative means to preserve something, to keep traditions. Whereas the left wing, you sometimes call it progressive, they have, it's about kind of how do we change the future. So by definition, you very often have fewer parties on the left, on the right spectrum, and more parties on the left spectrum, because how to change the future, you have plenty of ways. How to preserve something in the old is kind of, there are maybe one or two ways, but there are not so many different ways of how to preserve something that is existent. Now, how does this link with platforms? Social media works most effectively if you have one account with one message, one simple message. So preserving something is very simple, it's one message. Whereas on the left side, or on the more complex side, you have to explain a lot of things. That is when it becomes very difficult. And that is why I think what we can learn also from populists, or how they use these tools, we need to understand how we can make our complex issues in very easy, understandable messages.
Just one, in Greece, because we seriously fucked up everything, we have two forms of populism.
Yes.
Either left or right. So, and the conservative political discussion, and either the progressive political discussion was hijacked by populism.
And
Okay.
just a short comment on that. Of course, that's possible. So also left-wing populism, but what they do is the same as the right wings. They give very easy
Exactly.
answers. just one answer for
Very,
all the
very easy
problems.
answer.
Yeah.
And that actually ties into my question, which I want to go back to the question I asked all of you, which was, do we feel like the digital influence in politics has been weaponized by actors with nefarious sort of agendas? And I don't see the question up there now, but I think the response was something like 2/3 said yes. And Irakli, I want to go to you, because despite all the success stories we're talking about, despite some of the things that we're saying, this is how we combat it, why should we be optimistic? Should we be optimistic that digital influence in politics can be used for good?
Definitely. I think what we also have to understand is the context, and I'll kind of try to explain why there is a problem, and then how we should be optimistic. I think the problem is that we have to tie it to the overall deterioration of the democratization and democracy nowadays in the world.
Right.
And what we're going to be seeing in the years to come, at least I think there is going to be a cyclical nature of it, is going to be the authoritarianism as being fashy. Okay, it's kind of being more catchy.
Right.
And I think there are going to be more and more tools which these states are going to be using. For example, the state surveillance systems. I don't know if you've heard about it, but China is using it as kind of the control mechanism. There are others who are trying to emulate. So I think that the biggest idea there is to draw the lessons. And the lessons should be drawn from the fact that people have to start to recognize that this is going to be the problem. Because I don't think that at the national level there is the recognition of the problem to the level that is needed. And I think the governments have to really take it seriously. And usually when you radicalize a certain stream, and when there is a radicalization, there is going to be a response. And I think this cyclicality of it is telling us that there is going to be a response, but I think it will take time until there is a regrouping and coming up with the right response. I can give you my opinion how to challenge these campaigns, for example. Most of the times people are trying to refute. For example, if there is a malign campaign about a certain thing, they start to refute it. And I think it's the wrong strategy. What you have to do is that when you know that there is a problem, you do the forewarning. Basically, you try to immunize the segments of the society which are going to be which are going to be basically targeted by this kind of flows of information. So you have to be proactive in the outreach. And if the bad guys are using these platforms, you are asking how to use these platforms. The good guys can use those platforms as well. It's just not the way they have been doing it. So I think when I'm saying that the recognition of this problem has to be at the national level, they have to start to be using these tools to the degree that is necessary in order to challenge it.
I think that's very helpful. And in fact, I want to go 2 more rounds on this before we have to wrap up. But I want to try to port this out from beyond politics, because we got members in the room here from business, NGO, media, and just influencers from all different genres. Politics has had a lot of action over the last decade, I'd say. A lot of volatility, a lot of divide, a lot of lessons to be learned. So Levan, maybe I can go to you first before I go around to the rest of the group as well, which is to say, what would you say politics, governance, specifically related to digital, has a lesson to teach to other industries, has a lesson to teach to other verticals? From your vantage point, what have you felt like politics, despite the divide, is doing well and that could be helpful to others in different industries?
I'll talk about political campaigns because
Sure, please.
I witnessed that the budget of political campaigns has dramatically decreased because everyone tries to launch the ads of some political messages through the platforms which is free. For example, YouTube, Facebook, etc. Previous years they used to be national broadcasters and spent a lot of money for this, but now everyone has the equal opportunities, and those parties, political parties who had really low rated, started to launch their campaigns through this media, social media, and the rated increased. So it shows the impact of all these tools.
Same question to you, which is ultimately, what would you tell people in this room regarding some lessons learned from politics and how they port them to their world?
Well, it's not going to be something extraordinary. There are 3 things.
Please.
First of all, listen to the experts. Second of all, don't be cheap in your media spending. And third of all, don't always buy micro-influencers. Try to inspire them.
try to
inspire
them. Right.
Okay, because brands also must build communities around causes, and they don't always get it. Those three.
Yeah, I want to be a little bit bold and say this in this room, especially for influencers and business owners. You all heard the saying about advertisement that sex sells.
Right.
I think in the 21st century, it's politics sells. And you can see this if you look at the Super Bowl. Almost, if you watch the last Super Bowl, I don't watch the Super Bowl, but I watch the advertisements. Almost every single ad had a political message.
Right.
And if you listen to your followers, even fashion brands, fashion models, you hear very often that they want their influencer to take a stance.
Nike, Colin Kaepernick, that sort of campaign.
Exactly. So
Vain.
I would say politics sells today, no matter in which, no matter in which spectrum you are. And what is key, what you can learn from influencers, but also in politics, you see every time when people are not authentic, I think, and it doesn't matter in how your authenticity plays out. In Trump, we see the worst kind of authenticity maybe, but then I think when you're authentic, that's when you gain followers. And I think that's what you can learn.
Irakli, I'll give you the final word, which is, what are we wanting to port out from politics to the other verticals in this room?
There are some of the questions, and people are asking why we are not answering them. And can I?
Please, I'm not sure if that references
I
these
think there is a
questions or that the fact you're skirting my answers.
There is a question. Is populism also bad in rare cases when it provides answers to important questions? I think just to kind of go back to the issue of populism, I think that the problem with the populism is that it instrumentalizes the anger and resentment. It doesn't necessarily, it maybe helps you to spot the problem, and it gives you kind of the sense where the problem is, but it never comes up with prescription and recipes to basically challenge that on a policy level. So I think that the big problem is that the populism is often devoid of any policy prescriptions.
Right.
And that's why it's dangerous. And exactly. So I think that that's kind of the answer to that question. But other than that, in my opinion, as I said, the biggest problem comes from the fact that no one is trying to understand that the environment has changed, and you have to come up with a policy level response to that. And I think until that will not happen, we're going to be having the problems that we have.
30 seconds for you, which was the final thing, which is what would you port out from politics to the other verticals that we have?
Sorry?
What would you take from politics that you've learned and try to as wisdom to people at NGOs, businesses, etc.?
Well, I think people have been talking here about this, but I think it's extremely important to build the credibility and be consistent with what they do. And I think there was also a talk about the values. I think that's extremely important to stay with the values, because what we have a problem here with, when it comes to politics as well, is that there is a big vacuum of value-based leadership. So I think one thing that I would be really eager to, even not as an advice, but my kind of piece of thinking is that it's important. The values are important, extremely important, but also to be consistent and build credibility through this, and not through short-term gains.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for our panel one more time.
Because there's a batch of questions, anyone who wants to, they can reach us after and...
Absolutely. We tried to get as many as we could, so I apologize we didn't get through all of them. But yes, you guys will all be available and around to debate and have these conversations.